Well, kia ora, everyone. It's great to welcome you to this call. My name is Stephen Moe, and I'm just going to be hosting us here, talking with some amazing people doing work across the country in what I've been calling the impact sector. So it's quite a wide term. I think it embraces both not-for-profit, voluntary charity, but also can embrace social enterprise and business and other people who are about impact. So we've got a couple different people who are going to share about something that they're involved in, their initiatives, because the purpose of the call is to get us out of our silos. Very often we end up talking with people who think like us, who do similar things to us. And so actually hearing different perspectives, I think, is really important. And there's actually been a number of collaborations that I've heard about afterwards, where people have met other people on these calls and then gone on to do something or, had some synergy. So that's a really great outcome, I think. In that vein, after we've heard from some of our speakers, we're going to be, for those who have time, we're going to be going into breakout rooms. So you'll have a chance to actually get to connect with someone and be able to share a little bit of your story and what you're seeing in the sector. And then we'll report back so that everybody has an opportunity to learn. And yeah, that's really the aim of it. And hopefully if you're on this call, you got the email. There was a number of resources in the email, and it's really fun to get emails from people back saying, thank you for this or that. One of them, there was a request for more information. And as a result of that, there's been some connections made offline about that request. So that's pretty nice outcome. So the point of this is next week, I'll send a follow-up email to this video. And if any of you have links or things that are coming up, drop me a line and I'm happy to share them with the wider group. It looks like we've got nearly 40 people on the call at the moment, but that email now is going to more than 500 people. So there's a lot of people out there who are seeing the content, even if they're not joining the call. Now, we're really lucky. Thank you so much. I see the different guests who are going to share briefly about what they're doing and some of the things they're seeing. So I think we may start with you, Arron, if that's okay. We're excited to hear about Community Foundations of New Zealand. That's all the intro I'm going to do. I'm going to pass it over to you. Thank you.
Oh, kia ora katoa, everyone. Ko Arron tuku wena. Ko rongo whakata te iwi ko Halbert te whānau. Thanks, Stephen, for the opportunity. I trust everyone can see that screen that I'm showing there. Hopefully that's working. We appreciate the opportunity. I'm the Executive Director for the Community Foundations in New Zealand, and I just want to acknowledge also my colleague, Eleanor, who I think is on this conversation as well. Welcome everyone. Have you heard of the Community Foundation?
And just before you get into this, if you're not speaking, if you could put yourself on mute, that'd be good, so there's no feedback. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Stephen. So hopefully that's better. Have you heard of the Community Foundations before? I guess some will have. Some will be understand what we do, and some may never heard of Community Foundations before at all. So that's fine. I'm hoping this short presentation gives you some insight, a starting point anyway, into the Community Foundations in New Zealand. Do you work for a charity? And every year do you face that same challenge of having to seek the operational funding to run the service and provide the impact that you hope for? Have you ever wondered if there's a more sustainable model to this sector and making an impact? And I know that my past roles as a CEO and also working in philanthropy, both would be true. Seeking funds each year can be a real, really genuine challenge. I joined the Community Foundation New Zealand team just this year, actually, because I really believe in our sector, and I adore Aotearoa New Zealand. And I certainly, our vision at CFNZ is to really want to serve and amplify your impact in this sector. You'll see here from the community foundations, we've got 17 foundations spread, pretty well across New Zealand. Community foundations commenced in New Zealand in 2003, so we're not even 20 years old, really. But if you look at community foundations globally, then in the US, for example, community foundations are well over 100 years old. Stephen Tyndall and Tyndall Foundation were part of the vision to bring community foundations to New Zealand, and they continue to this day to be a valued partner in our work. Community foundations are one of the fastest growing areas of philanthropy in the world. For example, contributions to donor advice funds in the US in 2019 totaled close to $40 billion. And in 2020, Community Foundation New Zealand ourselves, we've seen 33% growth in our funds under management from 150 million to 200 million. And we don't share that number in any sense of bragging, but it really does, I think it's worth sharing because it reflects the generosity of everyday Kiwis in this beautiful country it has, and shows you, I guess, the growth potential of community foundations through partnering the generosity of everyday Kiwis with the causes that they care about and the causes that many of you actually lead. Our vision is not dissimilar to a lot of in the impact space, in the sense that we want to have an impact across communities in Aotearoa New Zealand, see them positively transformed through the power of local generosity. So how does a community foundation work as such? So here's a basic model that I think lays it out pretty well. So there's a gift, a donor gift that is given, and then community foundations in New Zealand then invest with our investment partners and grow that gift, and then the ongoing income that is earned from those funds are then granted out to local impact groups, community groups, not-for-profits like yourselves. So in essence, the CFNZ, if you like, kind of has a triune sort of responsibility, if you like. One, we work with generous Kiwis, with donors. We invest the funds, and we also have a distribution function as well. We, of course, believe that community foundations is a smarter giving model for a couple of reasons. I know one of the challenges I had when I was a CEO of a charity, when we would receive a bequest from someone in a given year, generally what would happen, the vast majority of that funding would go into support operational funds to pay someone's wages for that next year. And then the money was gone, if you like. But with the CFNZ model, a donor can give, and the benefit of their giving can be sustained forever. So you'll see on our website, communityfoundations.org.nz, there's actually a donor giving calculator on there. If someone was to give $20,000, and you can see the growth of that contribution into the community in perpetuity. Just a few numbers to wrap up. The Community Foundations of New Zealand have contributed 50 million grants into New Zealand communities in the last 5 years. In the last year, there's been 1,300 grants made to organisations across Aotearoa. We, as I mentioned before, have a couple of $100 million currently under management, and we also have committed bequests for future endowment of 400 million. So CFNZ, in essence, has contributions from everyday Kiwis, the generosity of around $600 million, which is not insignificant, because that'll grow in perpetuity and flow through into perhaps into your community group. We've received over 600 bequests to date, and the vast majority of New Zealand is covered through current CFNZ local community foundations. That's the speed dating version of CFNZ. I appreciate the opportunity, Stephen, and you can check out our website for any further information. You're welcome to contact me directly, or Alan, or actually, if you want to know anything further. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think if you have questions, then feel free to put them in the chat, And then Arron, if you can keep an eye on, you might be able to answer in the chat, because we're going to move on to some other people sharing. Just, I guess, an observation on what community foundations of New Zealand do. It's quite interesting to think that these are spread across the country. And I know some of you may not have come across them before, but actually this is quite a network, as you could tell from that presentation. And one of the things that interests me is that sometimes those community foundations can actually be an access point for that local community. And sometimes there's wealthy individuals who aren't sure what they want to do, don't really want to set up their own charity, but actually there is this sort of umbrella organization that could take funds and reuse them. And I see this sometimes where people have set up family, like their own charitable trusts or something, and then they want to wind it up and they're not sure what to do with the remainder. So this, is a potential option, isn't it, to be able to provide a vehicle for people to use. So thank you very much. We are going to move on quickly. And one of the reasons for the call is to just hear perspectives from lots of different people. And fortunately, we've got a few people here who've started things recently. So Razor, I'd love for you to come off of mute and just share with us a little bit about what you're doing. This is just the 3-minute version, but I personally have really enjoyed getting to know about your initiative, because I think what you're doing is really cool. And it'd be great if other people can find out about it. And for all of us, what encouragement can we take from what it is that Razor's doing? So you don't do what he does, but let's hear what he has to do and then take encouragement from it.
I was able to hear them, but nobody was able to hear me. Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead, Razor.
Okay, all good. How you going? I'm obviously Razor. Basically, I run Johnson & Cousins Hire, and that's my business. The reason why I'm mentioning that, I've also got a charity called Moral Compass. I'll quickly mention the business because I actually employ sort of troubled lads. Like at the moment, there's a 14-year-old foster kid who's causing trouble, and I think he's the alpha male. I had an ex-meth head who, when he left us, he actually had a car, a license, a WAF, and now he's got a full-time building apprenticeship. The reason why I mention that is because with Moral Compass, I take out troubled kids, alternate education. Not always the troubled. It can be a bit of a mix, but I really like the troubled ones, And the reason why I mention my business again is because at the end, sometimes I can give jobs. Sometimes I go into alternate education and take these kids. I'll put marquees up. See, and really, it's not rocket science. It just wears them out and stops them causing trouble. But the charity, the speed date, like that speed date version, is basically what I do is I take them hunting, sort of fishing. So an average day might be we get a McDonald's breakfast at 6 a.m. Then we go out and the kids get to actually drive an ATV, like a side-by-side ATV. Then we get the dogs out and we either have a pig hunt, a goat cull, a deer hunt. Then what we do is we do that for quite a long while of the day. And then I get them to cook a wild feed. So we have wild sausages and whatever patties in the back there. We get them cooked. And then they might do some shooting. Puts a lot of people off shooting, but I'm not sounding like an idiot. I was tier 2 special forces for like a long time. So I've taught people how to shoot from nothing up to sniper. And it's a long barreled rifle. I give them one round at a time. So they actually get to take away a target that they shoot. And then on the way home, they get pictures emailed, and then they get like a pie and a drink. And then sort of a bit of a follow-up is that I go back into the youth clubs and the alternate education and I see them again. But I'm also thinking of one massive idea I've got involving helicopters. Basically, the helicopter drops someone off here. They pay thousands like hunters, but they have to fly back. And as they fly back, I'm in their direct flight path. They pick us up and fly us to the top for a few $100, drop us off, and the kids get, there's stuff you can do. So that's basically what I do in a nutshell. I take these troubled kids and then hopefully I employ some and take them out and about. I'm also thinking of doing overnights with kids who've been once, and I know their ability, and then we'll do an overnight, but that's just sort of another idea it's building. So that's what I do, really. Take the troubled ones and tire them out for you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And the thing I love about what you do is these are people that, young people that in sometimes society has already given up. And, to take people out and show them the beauty of the wilderness, the outdoors, give them a different perspective, and then bring them back into their context. It's really awesome. So some of you listening may be thinking of synergies that would help Razor with this initiative. So feel free to ask him questions in the chat as well. We are jumping from one to one here today, but I would love to hear a different perspective. So Andrew from Charities Services, I think all of us on the call probably have connection in some way at some point with Charities Services. So we'd love to hear from your perspective, as in government, as involved with charities, bringing them in, supporting them. Can you give us a perspective on what you're seeing and things that you've got coming up?
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen. Tēnā koutou katoa, Colin and Phillips, tōku ingoa. So my name's Andrew Phillips. I'm Manager Engagement Business Improvement at Charities Services. I was planning on coming along today. We had a staff quarterly day planned where we all come together into the office. Now we're a bit more spread apart since COVID. Obviously, that's been thrown into. So this was an opportunity to come along today, because otherwise I was only going to be able to pop in for 5 minutes. I'm looking forward to this. So a lot of the things that we had planned in the next month or so have been thrown into a little bit of stark relief, but that's the nature of things these days. And we're definitely so we were planning on coming to Ōtautahi, Christchurch, and probably seeing Stephen next week for an open day for Christchurch. That's been delayed for now, but we will be visiting Christchurch in the next few months, hopefully, possibly. Obviously, things are a little bit moving right now. So in terms of sort of right now, very top of mind, I think this is probably the same for all of government and all of New Zealand, COVID response, and just thinking about what we're doing in this space. We've updated all the information on our website. So if you're interested in that space, please do check that out. That's got all like kind of links to what charities should be thinking about, what donors should be thinking about. Very much relying on previous messaging. Now, some of that is in the process of being updated. Obviously, the Delta variant has thrown up some new challenges. So some of that does require some thinking through and working with obviously partner agencies to make sure that messaging is correct and consistent. So that's just something to think about if any you're relying on any information. That includes the really excellent Volunteering New Zealand guidelines for voluntary organisations and volunteering. So that's something I think that's being worked through as we speak, about what's appropriate in this space. And although at level 4 it's pretty minimal what is possible. So other than that, we've got a new resource on our website. This is called the Charity Handbook. It's just a simple it's a simple booklet that basically we encourage charities to print out and put all the key information about their charity, including passwords to all their various things that they've got. It's an important thing to keep secure, but this is a thing we've had feedback on for years, that charities struggle to keep track of a lot of all the different information that they need for their charity. And when one person leaves, and this is an issue for all organisations, but particularly charities because of the high churn in officers, when one person leaves, you lose that information. So that's a new resource. Highly recommend using it, especially if you're working with a small charity. Other than that, we've got a webinar that we ran on the 20th of July. That's about what groups need to know before they register a charity. The recording's up on our website. And a new blog on health and safety obligations for charities that we worked with WorkSafe on. So that's another one that's worth having a look at, especially if you have any employees, but also if you have kind of contractors that work in that space, because it's some important obligations to think about. But always keen on hearing anyone's feedback or any questions that they have, and anything we can be working in the back end on. But that's me. Thank you, Stephen.
That's great. Thank you so much. And what we'll do is in a follow-up email, we can put in links to things like the guide that you just mentioned and upcoming things that may or may not happen, but we'll see. So thank you very much. That's yeah, that's really helpful. I think it's good to have you on these calls, Andrew, just because you are able to personalize the government entity that is Charity Services, because otherwise sometimes it feels like it's this department out there. So thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it. So I'd like to turn from you as Charity Services to another charity and just to hear another perspective. Again, this is to get encouragement from people who are out there on the ground doing the actual work, because sometimes we get too focused on the high level things. So Vicki-Anne, I'd love to hear from you about your initiative down here in Christchurch. If you could share, that would be great.
Good morning. Thanks, Stephen. My charity, well, not my charity, our charity is NZ Gifts of Love and Strength. We've been around since 2019 here in Christchurch. Stephen is our lawyer and gives us heaps of guidance. So thank you, Stephen, for everything you've been doing for us the past couple of years. We were set up the day after the mosque attacks, and we assisted the Muslim community for a good 6 months with care packages of groceries, toys, etc. After around 6 months, they said to us, can you please stand down, give us our mana back so we can look after our own community. We were then approached by Red Cross refugee resettlement team to say, hey, you're doing a great job. Can you please do welcome packages for every new refugee family that comes in? So what our welcome package is, it's not just a box of groceries that go out, it's beautifully gift wrapped in a pineapple box. It has handmade cards, it has a knitted heart, it has a painted rock, it has lots of beautiful baking from Good Bitches Baking. So every family that arrives in Christchurch has that sitting in their house when they arrive. And we also do exactly the same for victims of trauma. Now, victims of trauma can be anything from a house fire to a car accident, and sadly, families that are bereaved by suicide. We tend to get a lot of referrals from people who necessarily don't want to engage with some of the larger organisations for their own personal reasons. But this year, we've also done a lot of large, and over the past year, a lot of large disaster relief. We collaborated with the Student Volunteer Army during COVID with the delivery response. We were interviewing potential delivery people throughout New Zealand, and we also responded to the Mid-Canterbury floods. We set up a baking army and we were distributing baking out to the farmers that were affected by the floods. Now, a lot of people respond to a flood, etc., in a disaster when it immediately happens. We did something very different because we learned during the earthquakes that when a disaster happens, people respond immediately and then people are forgotten about. So we actually froze a lot of that baking and it's still being drip fed. And we're getting messages back from the farmers saying, hey, you haven't forgotten about us. That little fruitcake that Johnny made or Elaine made, it really made a difference. You haven't forgotten about us. So we've sort of learned that those wee pick-me-ups in the weeks and the months after mean a lot to people. And recently we have also collaborated a response to Westport. What started out was one person said we want to respond to Westport, and we ended up with 4 collection points throughout Christchurch and built a big freight truck going to Westport. We sorted and labelled every box. We made sure that there were no dirty clothing, there was no missing buttons, zips, whatever. It was all labelled, so when it arrived in Westport, it made it very easy for the donation hub over there. We also assisted Samara over in Westport because they had no idea how to set it up and run it. So we were assisting them with how to set up who was affected by the floods, how to make sure it was going out to the right families, because sadly, as you probably know, in a disaster, everybody wants to get what's going around, whether you're affected by not, and everyone was coming in to get everything. So we assisted in that capacity. We are a charity that when we see a disaster happens, we try to collaborate with as many parties as possible to get things up and moving. And we had the Student Volunteer Army coming to us again saying, hey, can you get food out? We've got 70 volunteers going over, you need to get over. So we love working with other charities. We have struggled. We can't get funding because we dabble all over the show with helping lots of different areas we're seen as duplicating services. So it's gut-wrenching, but we have survived nearly 3 years by going out and finding different fundraisers. None of our team receives a wage. We're all volunteers. But I guess you could say resilient. We are resilient. We're not going away. We'll fundraise. We will survive. Yeah, we love what we're doing. On our team, we have someone that was, well, he's pretty well known. He sung the national anthem at the last Muslim memorial event. And we have 2 of us that were severely affected by trauma ourselves. So we've all got lived experience. And yeah, if you want to collaborate with us, reach out. We love collaboration because we can only survive by helping one another. And yeah, thanks again, Stephen, for this opportunity.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Vicki-Anne. And yeah, it's amazing the variety of people that you've helped, because I know there's been people who've, you know, lost their homes in fires. There's been people who've had car accidents, and there's been people, you know, the shootings. So it's been a very diverse range of people that you've been able to reach out to and help. So thank you so much for sharing some of your story. That's great. And I've put in the chat the link to your Facebook page as well, in case people want to know more. So we're going to turn from that now. Colin, I'd love to hear from you just about your initiative, because this is a bit different in the sense of you're looking to empower people to actually raise funds through a new way. I'm just going to hand over to you. It's kind of a new form of stock exchange. So would you be able to tell us more about that?
Yes, kia ora koutou, Colin Magee tāku ingoa. Yeah, probably a little bit different from most of the people on the call. My background is I was actually a lawyer and I worked at the Financial Markets Authority, which is the securities regulator here in New Zealand. But the reason why I think it's relevant to you guys, when I was working there, I used to hear a lot of issues with both commercial businesses, but also charities who are really struggling to raise funds. The thing about a lot of charities, so social enterprise businesses, you're doing something good for the world, but the amount of money that you can actually raise from people just giving money seems to be going down. But people are willing to effectively lend money to businesses or get a small return from the business in return for donating their money. Now, the trouble with that is securities regulation suddenly hits as soon as you want to give anything back to the people that give you money. So if you're giving them the money back after a period, or if you're giving them a return, you're perhaps creating social housing, or you might be doing land conversions that are actually generating some sort of income and want to give something back to encourage people to give you money. You can't normally do that without it effectively being a financial product, and therefore you incur a lot of regulation, and it effectively becomes uneconomical to do that. That means that larger social enterprises end up trying to raise money from the same foundations and going back to the same people to raise that money. We can't go out to the general public, even though there was actually a lot of people out there who would like to be able to either lend or invest in businesses that are providing a social or environmental benefit. So really, that's why we created Catalist. So it's to help both smaller businesses and social impact businesses be able to raise money and be able to access the general public at a much cheaper position than they would previously able to do that. Now, I don't want to get in 4 minutes, I won't get into technicalities of exactly how we do that, but essentially we are a stock exchange. So that means that businesses, including social impact projects and anything that is generating a financial return, but in addition can be a social return or an environmental return, they can list that project or business on our exchange. That means they can then raise funds, and it's up to 20 million per year you can raise from the general public without at a lower cost than you would otherwise be able to do. You have to comply with our market rules, which are all about being transparent to your investors, and there are certain protections for investors still. So in the same way as if you were a business on a more traditional stock exchange, such as the NZX, You still have to comply with having at least an independent director, and you have to produce accounts and have those accounts audited. But it means that you can access those retail investors and raise up to 20 million a year. Those investors are then able to, at regular intervals, not every day, but perhaps once or twice, maybe even 4 times a year, they can get together and they can have secondary market trading. So if that person who's maybe lent you some money or invested in the social impact business needs that money back for their own purpose, then they know they can have regular opportunities where they can do that. So it means there's what we call liquidity, so ability to buy and sell those investments, and that means that you're again more likely to be able to get in new investors. So I'll probably just leave it at that, because I think in 3 minutes I can't really go through the whole explanation of how it all works. But if that's something that is of interest to anyone, the ability to have the larger businesses access investment from the general public. So the sort of things it might work for is, if you've got a project that generates some sort of return as well as a social impact or an environmental impact, then it can be beneficial in those cases.
That's great. Thank you, Colin. There's a question in the chat. Do you want to just respond to that one?
So the question is this crowdfunding? So no, this is something different from crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is where a business raises money by selling shares, and it's an unregulated in the sense that you don't have to release all the information. So businesses don't have to release all the bad news, and it means it is limited to just 2 million for those businesses that they can raise. It also is, there's no ongoing trading of those securities. So the people who invest that money, there's no ability for them to be able to sell their investment and get their funds back if they need to. And so that restricts the number of people that would go into those, and it restricts the size of the sort of people that would go into those investments. This is a sort of step up from that. So it's actually a market where you have to release all of the information at the points of time. So it might be once a year, once every quarter. Each time you allow the trading of these securities, you release information, and then there is that ongoing trading. So the ability for investors, if they need their money back, to be able to get that money, those funds back. And it therefore means you can fund much larger projects. So things up to 20 million per year. So perhaps projects to build blocks of housing instead of just one house, or projects to convert a large amount of farmland could be facilitated within those limits.
That's great. Thank you, Colin. And I know it's been a journey to get here, hasn't it, to actually make it. The dream is now, so it's all now live. You're taking. Yep.
It's all now live. Yes, it's taken us 2.5 years to get all the licensing in place. So we're now New Zealand's second stock exchange. So other than NZX and ourselves, we're the only licensed stock exchange in New Zealand. Obviously designed for smaller businesses. So it's for commercial businesses as well as social impact businesses. But we do have rates that will make it economical for social impact businesses. So it's been a journey. We've been doing private market trading for businesses for the last year. We've just got our license last month for the stock exchange, the public stock exchange, and we're working with the first businesses now. So we hope to be announcing the first maybe three or so businesses that will go on the public market within the next month or so.
Well, that's great. It's good to have options, right? So and I've actually had a couple of emails when people saw that you were speaking today saying, oh, I'm going to listen in and find out more. So if anybody's interested, I put in the chat the link to your website so they can hopefully click through and find. And in the follow-up email, maybe we can attach something that gives more of an explanation as well.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
thanks.
Cool. All right, well, now what we're going to do, there was one other person I asked to speak, but I don't see them among the chat. So I'm not sure if Sam is here, but under a different name. If you're here, now's your chance to say. I don't see Sam there. He's set up a charity which is doing some amazing work around people who are out of prison on bail, or who are about to go into prison. So I was hoping that he could share, but maybe we'll just save it for the next time, because we've heard a lot of different perspectives, which has been great. And I don't know, Rodney and Katie, I didn't prep you for this, but the exchanges that you've been having around the question that I put in the email, I don't know if either of you would like to share about that, because I think it might be something that would be of interest to other people here. So this was the question that was asked in the email. Does anyone know of any independent and credible research about the possible future shape and nature of cross-cultural community-led engagement to identify how to measurably improve economic, social, cultural, and environmental well-being in a coordinated way, to speak with one voice and incentivize a more coordinated decision-making of government and/or industry? Would either of you be interested in saying or commenting on that?
Yeah, Rodney, if you're happy for me to talk, I'm super happy to. It probably helps to give a bit of context about who I am and who I work for. So I work for the newly established Mental Health and Wellbeing Commission. We've been set up since February 9th this year, and we've been set up as a watchdog of the mental health, addiction and wellbeing system. So essentially we're the eyes and ears of communities across Aotearoa. And our focus is on monitoring mental health and wellbeing, but also we are an advocacy body within government to do exactly what Rodney was talking about, is to bring people together to advocate for transformation of the mental health, addiction and wellbeing system. So my full-time role is just meeting with communities, hearing about issues, but more importantly, hearing about solutions and starting to shine a light on those. So in my engagement, we have engaged with communities all across Aotearoa, particularly focusing on those who are marginalised and disadvantaged by the system. We've received a huge amount of feedback about how government engages with consultation fatigue, one of the biggest problems. So communities being asked the same questions over and over again by multiple government agencies, and either being underrepresented or invisible, so not seeing their views and voices reflected in policies and funding decisions. I mean, I appreciate that doesn't happen all the time, but it is quite a consistent theme. We're also hearing that people are giving feedback, and that's not necessarily leading to equitable decisions. So for instance, government agencies may go and engage with communities in a 2-week window, tick box the largely mainstream people who have the platforms, have the resources to have their voices shared, and they're missing out on these communities. So people do feel quite unheard and unvalued. People want to see a more coordinated and genuine approach to engagement that's trauma informed and focusing on communities whose voices need to be at the table. So if you would like, I'll put my email into the chat and I can share the data that we've collected on engagement. It's probably telling most of you to suck eggs, but it just sort of demonstrates that we are collecting these insights to encourage government to engage differently. Rodney, did you want to add anything?
Oh, first of all, great. Thanks, Stephen, thanks so much for having me and connecting me with Katie and Mike from I think Health Disabilities, and also credit to Tim Bird, who's here, who's connected me with Stephen. So thanks so much. I mean, do you want the 30-second version? Okay. So I'm the president of a residents association of a suburb in Wellington, and spent 2.5 years getting to the point where we've just launched a coordinated community enterprise to enable residents to connect, build trust, have access to resources they need to improve their well-being and resilience, and to speak with one voice into decision making. And looking to release that to other residents associations from mid next year, once we've had it evaluated in November this year under a bespoke copyright license free of charge.
That's great, thank you. Well, I'm glad I opened it up. I learned something new. Thank you, Katie. And thank you, Rodney, for sharing. Yeah, if you want to put contact details in the chat, then people can reach out if they're interested. This is why I love doing this call, though, is that you just hear different perspectives and you find out about people who are taking, you know, at-risk youth out into the wilderness and you find out about consultation that you didn't even know was happening. So I think it's quite a good touch point to be able to do that. And my plan is just to continue hosting them. This actually started during lockdown last year, and originally we were holding them every Friday. But when we came out of lockdown, we thought, well, actually, that's a bit too often. So now they're held every 2 months. So just be watching your email. If you hear, you probably got an email, so you're on the list. And I try to hold them every 2 months on a Friday at noon. It just seems to work. So one of the other things that I love about this, and where I've seen people actually have collaborations, is this little breakout time. I'm conscious that at 1 p.m., I'm sure we all want to be watching an update, although I'm not sure if it's happening the normal way, because I think they're having meetings today, aren't they? But let's aim to finish at 1 p.m. anyway. So I'm going to send you to breakout rooms. If you need to drop off and go do other things, that's cool. I'm going to put about 3 or 4 of you in each room, and this will be a chance for you to get to know somebody, talk with someone else, hear about what other people are doing. But what I'd like you to do is try to bring something back to the main room. What's a point that you talked about of something that you're seeing in New Zealand? Obviously, the lockdown is front of mind, but even beyond that, you know, what are the things that you're seeing? So I'm gonna create some breakout rooms, and then when you come back, if one of you can share as well, you'll just have 10 minutes to just introduce yourselves, have a nice chat, and then I'll bring you back. So I'm just looking here, there's about 30 now. So yeah, great to see you all back in this main room. So hopefully that was a chance to get to know some people, maybe hear a different perspective. Yeah, ask some questions and hear from someone else. So there was 6 groups. If it's possible, if each of the groups can kind of give a brief summary of something that you talked about that might benefit the rest of us, that would be awesome. Does anybody want to be brave and go first?
I'll go. We were group 6. We had Don and Arron and Razor in our group. And we heard about the amateur radio membership, which was quite amazing. I was quite impressed with that. And then we talked a little bit about the interface of the community foundations and local government and local representation, and how to get a better connection between place-based actions and local funding. And maybe there's some sort of collaboration between the foundations and local government, especially with the review of local government coming on, and whether or not, how do we maintain that small place-based focus with funding if they're going to go to regional local government, and just making sure that that was happening. So that's what we sort of talked about mostly. Kia ora.
That's great, thank you, great summary. There's maybe some follow-up for Arron there to consider as well. All right, anybody else?
I can go. Kia ora. My name is Kate. Our group, Tony, Rachel, and Natalia and I, we mainly just introduce ourselves to each other. So maybe I'll just use the time to summarize what each of us is up to. So if anyone wants to make contact, they can. So Tony is with Wanaka Waste Busters, which is a zero waste recycling objective. And they're working with reuse shops and Enviro School program. So you can get in touch with Tony. Rachel said not to mention anything about her. She's in the early stages of developing a charity. She's a nurse working with diabetes. So maybe don't get in touch with her quite yet because she's maybe not ready. And Natalia in our group was also in the setting up stage of a charity. Her charity is called the Red Bow, and they're aiming to provide accessible quality education for kids in need. So she's still working on that, and we'll be launching that maybe in a couple months. And my name is Kate. I run Spin Poi, which is an organization that works with Poi to improve health and well-being for people of all ages and abilities in Aotearoa and globally.
That's great. It's always so, I mean, I know we need more time, right? Another 10 minutes at least, but it's good at least that you can connect briefly and hear about other people. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes it feels hard to do the work, to do the mahi. and actually knowing that there's others out there across the country who are doing something that's completely different to what you do, but that is actually generative, giving back in some way. I get really encouraged by that. So thank you for that summary. And feel free in the chat, if you want to put websites or whatever, then go for it. That's fine by me. Another group want to share?
You're on mute, I think.
There we are. I'll go for our group 5. There were 4 of us. One of us, Rodney, was involved in a residents association, so doing very specific work in the community. And the other 3 of us, Craig, Colin and myself, were all talked about aspects of setting up structures which allowed tax benefits and ease for people giving money in. I talked a certain amount about Alana Irving's Open Collective as a brilliant way for, particularly for groups of people who don't have a bank account and don't have a legal entity and may or may not be doing something charitable, and they can set up an open collective page and have either all the tax benefits of a charity or none of the tax disadvantages of receiving money for a venture and then having it go through your personal bank account. Instead, it can go through the open collective bank account. So, and I'm just helping, supporting Alana in that. That's all I've got to say.
That's great. Thank you for that summary. And actually, if people are interested in that initiative that was just mentioned, in the email I sent out, there was another email attached called Fund Holding White Paper. And Alana's been a big source of information that's now made its way into that white paper. So if you have time, if you're in lockdown, go have a look at the email and the attachment that said Fund Holding White Paper, because we've been co-writing something about this idea of how do we make it easier for new initiatives to be supported by already existing charities. And I think there's at least 15 people who've commented on the draft white paper, but would welcome more case studies and examples. So thank you. It's a good excuse to mention that. All right. Any other groups? There must be at least 1 or 2 more.
So we had Vicky, Pravda, Mike, myself and Helen. Most of the theme that went through our conversation was around the vulnerable. And I was brave or courageous or slightly silly to suggest to Vicky that she might be interested in what we're doing. When she spoke from New Zealand Gifts, Love and Strength, what struck me was she was a broker. And I said that to her in the small room. And what we're trying to do in our suburb is a systematic approach by which to build connections in the entire suburb. So I hope you don't mind, Vicky, I felt to say that because I said that to you before, and more than happy to chat about, you may or may not be interested in the systematic approach we're taking, and we're looking at wellbeing from an economic, social, cultural and environmental perspective. So it's community wellbeing, community resilience from a suburb perspective, 14,000 residents.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
It's great. Well, we'll be able to connect you offline as well. I've got both of your emails, so I'm happy to do that. Cool. All right. Anyone else?
Kia ora. I'll very, very quickly jump in. I was with Katie, Arnie, Alison, and Lisa, and I'd say the threads, we spent most of the time connecting, which was wonderful, and everyone sort of shared what they're up to, which in the spirit of working out loud is obviously really helpful, and thanks, Stephen, for providing this opportunity to do that. The 2 threads that came through for us, I thought were wellbeing and social enterprise. And so it seemed like, on point, but also good to see that we're focusing on that in some common ways.
Great. yeah, I could see the names of the people in the different groups, and I was imagining the conversations that were going on. So that was really fun. Cool. Was there one more group?
It must be ours. We're not a brave group, apparently. Brave in our own ways. But our group pretty much did, again, spend most of our time getting a bit of an idea of what each other does, and a little bit of reforming connections and making new connections between us, I think, would probably be fair to say, and get a little bit of an idea of what else people are up to out there, more than necessarily anything new. But I think we, again, like others, touched on threads of social enterprise and that kind of carry on. So yeah, it's good.
Great, thank you. Yeah, well, you've for some of you, this is the first time to a call like this, so I welcome and thank you for coming along and joining in. The spirit of it is really just to talk with each other and have conversations that you might not normally have had. So I'll follow up next week. I'll save the video down and edit it up, and then I'll send it round. So if you know other people who aren't here today but would be interested, feel free to forward it on to them. If they contact me and let me know, I can just add them to the email list, because it's a growing thing. You know, it's kind of organic, and it grows because, you know, Tim tells Rodney, and Rodney ends up connecting with Katie. And so it's a very organic type of process. But hopefully you get the spirit, the intention of what it's trying to be. So it's August now, so we'll have another one in October, and just be watching out your inboxes. Like I said in the email, there's a whole bunch of other resources and things that are coming up in terms of events and papers and, you know, surveys to fill in. So if any of you have things that you know of that would be of interest to the wider group, bearing in mind we had about 45 on this call, but there's about 500 that get the email, then just drop me links or whatever you want. It's a very loose association. So wish you all a great weekend, and thank you so much for joining. Cheers.
Thanks, Steve.